So good morning, everybody. I hope you're hearing me fine. We're in line from Chateau de Montfaucon in France. My name is Marie de Pince. Unfortunately, my husband Rudy can't be here with us this morning, so I'll be telling you about our property and about our wines. So we're the owners of Chateau de Montfaucon. We're a family estate. Located in the southern Rhone Valley. We'll see later the map of Rhone Valley. And to situate us better, we're situated right across the river from Châteauneuf-du-Pape on the right bank of the Rhone River. So we'll discover first the Rhone region, and then we'll talk more about the estate and the history that we have lots of in Montfaucon. So first we have the map of France to locate the Rhone Valley. So it's in the southeastern part of France. And the Rhone Valley is composed of the northern Rhone part, which is famous for the Syrah made red wines. And then the southern part of Rhone Valley, which is also called the Meridional part, closer to the Mediterranean Sea. And the Rhone Valley, sometimes the French appellation system can be a little bit complicated. In the Rhone Valley, there's altogether 28 different appellations. Of them, they are in 3 or even 4 different levels. We start with the basic appellation is Côte-du-Rhône. Then we have Côte-du-Rhône village without the name of the village, and then Côte-du-Rhône village with the name of the village. And after those come the cru appellations. Northern Rhone is only composed of 8 different cru appellations, but in the southern part of Rhone, then we have the Côte-du-Rhône, Côte-du-Rhône village, and the cru. And when it comes to our estate Montfaucon, our cru is Lirac, but we also make Côte-du-Rhône and a little bit of Vin de Pays wines. In the next map, we can see a little bit closer view of where we're located exactly. So here we have a close-up of southern Rhone Valley. You can see Avignon, and a little bit north from Avignon, where the star is, this is Montfaucon. So you can see we're on the right bank of the river, just opposite from Châteauneuf-du-Pape, and on our side of the river, the cru appellations are Lirac and Tavel. We make some Lirac in red and white. The rosé is also a possibility in this cru, but we don't have this color, at least in Lirac, not at the moment. And our neighbor, Cru Tavel, is known only for the rosé wines. So this is, in brief, the composition and the hierarchy of the wines in the Rhone Valley. If you have any questions at any stage, please don't hesitate to interrupt me. Then we can go and talk more about Montfaucon. So the tech sheet or specific sheets, those will be in France, in the Rhone region, in the southern Rhone Valley. When we're talking about Montfaucon, there's a lot to talk about because the estate has a long history dating back to the 11th century. I'll talk more about this when we have the photos to support the information that I will give you. And also a long history in making wine. A part of the estate is a winery that was built at the end of the 16th century. And then we can say that our modern wine history started in 1995 when my husband restarted making wine on the estate. And as I said, our specialty or our main appellations are Cru Lirac and then Côte-du-Rhône. And the estate size is about 60 hectares nowadays, which is still considered as a medium-sized estates in the southern Rhone Valley. It may sound huge compared to some Burgundy, for example, but in the Rhone Valley or southern Rhone Valley, the estate's a little bit bigger. So 60 hectares is our current production. So welcome to Montfaucon. Here we can see perfectly our location in and the castle. So Montfaucon Castle was built first tower on the 11th century on the border of the Rhone River, on the right bank, which at the time was a part of the Kingdom of France. And on the opposite side, so the side of Châteauneuf-du-Pape, was the Holy Roman German Empire. Montfaucon was one of the fortresses that guarded the border, hence the Rhone River. And also the Rhone River was important for the river traffic, transporting goods up and down the river. And Montfaucon had somewhere an important role in that river traffic, controlling it, and also collecting taxes from the boats passing by. We can have maybe the next slide, a little picture of the region as well. Maybe some of you have visited Southern Rhone Valley. I apologize for the bad precision of this photo. We can see in the front line Montfaucon Castle, and behind the Mont Ventoux mountain, which dominates our landscape, and it's also known, if any one of you are fans of cycling, for the Tour de France cycling. So this is to show you a little bit about our views and our landscape. So the exact situation of Montfaucon is 15 kilometers north from Avignon. Here's the two of us, myself, Marie, and my husband, Rodolphe, or Rudy. It's easier for foreigners to pronounce. And I'll tell you a little bit more about the wine history, coming from the castle's history. So 11th century was the first tower of the castle, and then two other towers were added in the medieval ages to form a triangular-shaped fortress, hence guarding the border. My husband's family acquired the castle in 1756, and this is when France was still a kingdom, and hence they could present their honors to the king and get the title of baron, which is attached to the property. And you will note this later on when we're talking about our wines. Since Montfaucon, the castle is truly here, there's a lot of history. So also in our wines and the name of our cuvées, you can see there's a lot of attachment to the property and to the people who have had their importance for the castle. We're standing here in front of the facade of the castle, which is the newest part. The castle was enlarged and restored at the end of 19th century by Baron Louis, who was my husband's great grand uncle. So it's going back a little bit. And Baron Louis, so he did the important work of restoring Montfaucon, but he remained single. He didn't marry, and gave the castle at his death to his young niece Madeleine, who was my husband's grandmother. So we're stepping over one or two generations. And Madeleine had an important part of in Montfaucon history during the Second World War. She saved the castle from being exploded by the Germans, who occupied it during 2 or 3 years. As you have maybe seen, this is going to the history a little bit from the region, but it's interesting to know. For example, in Chateau the castle was exploded by the Germans who were retrieving, and thanks to Madeleine Montfaucon, the castle is still here. But it was also Madeleine who had already decided earlier to stop making wine on the estates in 1930s, which was also the boom time of the cooperatives in the region. And then it was only in 1995 when my husband, second of 4 boys of Count and Countess de Pins, that he came back to the estate and restarted making wine. At that time, the property had 17 hectares of vineyards, and since then we have grown to have 60 hectares, like we said before. Then we can have a look at, I mentioned we have an old wine history as well. We have an image of our old winery. So this is the winery that was built in the 16th century and served as the castle's winery until 1930s. And when Rodolphe restarted making wine, he made the old winery as our barrel aging cellar. It's got perfect conditions for aging wine, no air conditioning. 500 years ago, it's amazing how they knew to build a cellar or a cave that has perfect humidity control and not a very slow temperature change in a year as well. So you can see that there's a good few barrels now for our production, but what's important to know that there's no new barrels. my husband's style of wine, which he has always enjoyed, and the style that he has created in Montfaucon is more with finesse and elegance, and where we use the barrels like they did in the old times. It's a container, but it's not something that would bring the principal aromatics to the wine. So all our barrels are from one wine to 10 years old. Then we can talk a little bit about our vineyards. Here's Rudy. We have an exceptional old vineyard of Clairette that we'll talk about a little bit later as well. That's over 150 years old now. So altogether, the 60 hectares that we have, so in Lirac, Côte-Turon, and Van de Pey, we are not certified bio. I think this is the term in English as well. But we work, we can say 95% in a biological way. So we've never used any pesticides, and do really minimum intervention in the vineyards to respect the nature and also respect the vineyards and the fruit that comes from there. In the next slide, we can see one way that we work some of our vineyards, particularly these old vineyards, by horse. This is a little going back in time a little bit, but there's vineyards, particularly this old one, and also some newer plantations that we only work by horse because it's more tender to the wines and doesn't break them. And last year we're considering going forward with becoming officially a bio producer, and last year we did the first full year with only products, vineyard products that are accepted in the bio. So this is something to follow. We do all 95% of our picking by hand. This also ensures the quality of grapes that we get on the cellar. So all the sorting is done by the pickers on the vineyards. We have a team of around 25 people working for us in the vineyards during harvest time, which lasts in our region for nearly a month. Southern Rhone region is known for the number of grape varietals growing here. Officially, the Côte-Turon region has 28 varietals, 27 varietals that we can use. Châteauneuf-du-Pape is known for their 13, but that's not all of them, as you can see. So harvesting is done by hand to ensure the quality of grapes, and obviously by that in our wines as well. We have another view of our pickers at work in one of our vineyards, which is closest to the castle. And then a portrait of Rudy as well at the winery. If I'm too short on some details on how we work or anything, so just don't hesitate to interrupt me. And maybe some of you can tell me more about this photo of Rudy visiting you in Michigan. No, I don't know if your audio is on. So just the way what we work. So the 60 hectares that we have a production of roughly 20,000 cases at the moment. If you compare that to the number of hectares, you can easily calculate that our yields are quite low. This comes from the fact that, as you can see also from the photos, that a lot of our vineyards are quite old and don't have big yields, which is not something that something that we are aiming for. We're aiming for quality, not quantity. And of our production, 85% is sold export. So we work with a lot of countries, with America and with Kindred Wines since 2015. So it's a rather new collaboration that we are very happy about. And this gets us to travel as well. As you can see, we live a small provincial village, which is quiet, but at the same time, we're connected to all over the world nearly every day. Oh, Emily's making a note. Sean Sutton is in that photo. Maybe one of your team members that I haven't had the pleasure of meeting yet. Okay, then we can maybe talk about our wines. So We have 11 different cuvées at the moment, so that's quite many. And what's important, of course, when you have several cuvées is that they each have their own identity. Kindred Wines is representing nine wines out of the 11, and we'll talk a little bit about all of them. And we'll start with our Viognier white wine. So Viognier is known as varietal, so for sales points this is good, but it can also be a little bit challenging, as Viognier as a varietal is quite aromatic, and if one doesn't pay attention of picking it when it's just about ripe, then it becomes too heavy. So what we have seen with our Viognier is that some people are first reluctant, but when they taste it, they are really positively surprised by the freshness of our Viognier. And like my husband would say, Viognier always gets us coming back from summer holidays very early, because we need to start picking it before it gets overripe and too heavy. So for you really to stress the fact that this is a Viognier which has the aromatic characters, and more exotic fruits, like sometimes we have a little bit of pineapple notes, even lychee notes, but also we have some white flowers, but definitely the freshness. And here, and what we see, Viognier is often enjoyed as an aperitif, or even with some grilled white fish. That would be a nice pairing. And we do the Viognier only aging in tanks. Then Comtesse Madeleine, which is now a Lirac white wine. There's a note on the selling points that this wine used to be Côte-du-Rhône up until 2014 vintage, and since 2015 vintage we are Lirac. The reason for this is that actually before we declassified all of our Lirac whites to Côte-du-Rhône, as we didn't have enough to make this cuvée in Lirac. And in 2015 we were able to acquire a small plot of Grenache Blanc in Lirac, which complemented nicely the selection we already had. So for 2015, Comtesse Madeleine is a Lirac white blend of Marsanne, Claret, Grenache Blanc, and Picpoul. This white wine is quite gastronomic, we could say. It's got a nice length and roundness in the mouth, but also freshness, which is very important. And we'll talk about this also with our red wines. And it's definitely a wine that can also have 1 or 2 years aging in bottle, still keeping the freshness. For this one, totally different aging from the Viognier. Comtesse Madeleine, we do fermentation and aging in barrels for roughly 8 months. We bottle, then we keep the wine for 6 months before releasing, because we realized that this wine is a little bit more complex, so it needs some bottle time to express itself better. And also for service temperature, Viognier needs to be served chilled, but Comtesse Madeleine needs 3 or 4 degrees more, so that the aromas and the texture will be at its best. So definitely a reference in Lirac and Southern Rhone and complex Southern Rhone white wines. Then we'll talk about Vin de Madame la Comtesse de Montfaucon. So it's a little bit of a long name, and as you can see from the label, it's an old-fashioned writing as well. And we'll come across this label again with the red wines. It's an old family label from 1829 that we used first for Vin de Monsieur le Baron in red. And since we acquired this beautiful old vineyard of Claret in 2012, we declined the label for white wine as well. So this was the first picture where we saw Rodolphe with the old, huge push of Claret wines. So this wine is a very rare, small production. It only comes from this single vineyard that's less than 1 hectare, 0.7 hectares, so that would make 1.4 acres. So depending on the year, we have from 6 to 9 barrels of this wine. And Claret, we like it a lot. It's not a varietal that you would see often by itself. It's often in the blends of Southern Rhone white wines. but by itself, particularly coming from old vineyards like this, it has a certain intensity, and it's also what we say indigenous varietal from here, and it's perfectly adapted to our climates, particularly summers like last year we had, very dry and very warm. It's got a great resistance. And also, despite these conditions, the wine has a surprising minerality, nearly salinity, and often presents also pastry notes, yeast notes, and some orange peel, and even sometimes what's the word, chamallow, like a marshmallow kind of things. But it's extremely elegant, and the minerality makes it a fresh wine. And this is a wine that we age 8 months in barrels, we bottle, and we age at least another year in bottle, because we think this is the time the wine needs. So at the moment, you have 2014, the wine is just beautiful, but it's particular. So we think it's a wine that it's more targeted to sommeliers in high-end restaurants, and also amateurs who know to appreciate the varietal and its characteristics. And then we go through the rosé before going to red wines. So rosé has known a huge success over the past few years. We made one rosé as a vin de France rosé, Les Gardettes. Every year the varietals in our rosé are a little bit different. It depends on the vintage a little bit, and the yields on different varietals. You'll be receiving the 2017 shortly, maybe in a month or so. So this year we are a blend of just two varietals, Grenache and Syrah, and the rosé is very aromatic. It's got beautiful notes of yellow pea, cheese, a little bit grapefruit zest, and also surprisingly some notes of white pepper, which gives a little bit of a punch to the wine. So our rosé has a nice structure in the mouth, and also volume and aromas, and this is what we're looking for. There's many different kinds of rosés, the very pale Provence rosés, but we're more interested in making a rosé that's a nice rosé to have with summer meals. And Les Gardettes Rosés definitely has an interesting price point. And also, we have already talked about quality, and we'll keep on addressing that. So we want to address that, well, coming from Montfaucon, and since we want to be considered among the best quality producers in our region, already from the Vin de Pays, there's a quality signature in all of our wines. So there's something interesting to look forward to this summer with this rosé. I hope it goes well, and hope you have a lovely summer as well. Then passing on to red wines. So Les Gardettes also in red wine. And these two wines, by the way, they are with screw tops, which might be interesting for certain clientele. Les Gardettes Red is also a blend that varies a little bit from one vintage to another, again, depending on the characteristics and the yields. And it's a wine that it's issued mainly from our younger vineyards. Well, some of the younger vineyards are already 15 years old, and some are just coming to production. So we have Grenache, Cinsault, Carignan, and Syrah, only aged in concrete tanks, bottled after 18 months of aging, which is still nowadays maybe a lot for just a vin de Pays. But we think the red wines need 2 winters after harvest to really settle and show more their characteristics and more roundness. So Les Gardettes, we don't make this wine to be aged. It's to be enjoyed young and fruity, and every occasion, and wine truly for pleasure. And I think maybe by its price point as well, it can be interesting as a house wine, as a class pour for some restaurants. And again, we address that the wine carries our quality signature, if we can say so. And a lot of people are surprised by the quality of this wine, and particularly the price quality ratio. Then we are moving on to appellation wines. So Côte-du-Rhône, like I said, introducing the region, Côte-du-Rhône is a quite large region, and actually 48% of the production in the Rhône Valley, the wines are appellation is Côte-du-Rhône. So you can imagine there's a lot of producers, a lot of different styles, and so forth. So we would like to think and say that our Côte-du-Rhône is more on the high end of all the Côte-du-Rhônes by the fact that the grapes are issued from already older vineyards of approximately 40 to 50 years would be the medium age for the vineyards. We do all hand picking, which is absolutely not demanded for Côte-du-Rhône appellation, but for us it's important to ensure the quality of the wine. And we also like to keep, I mentioned all the, we can use altogether 27 different varietals in the southern Rhône Valley. And here we have a Côte-du-Rhône that's a blend of 6 varietals. Grenache giving the basis and also giving the wine its nice roundness and a lot of cherry aromas. Some Syrah, some Carignan, Cinsault, and Counoise. We use all these 5 varietals to make a balanced wine. Grenache, which is very round and but has also sometimes tendency of being high alcohol, and it's nicely balanced with, for example, Carignan and Cinsault and Counoise that are a little bit later ripening, particularly Counoise and Carignan having a little bit more higher natural acidity. So this is what we're looking for in our wines, to have several varietals to enable us to make balanced wine, and always more in the elegant style. And the Côte-du-Rhône also, we only age in concrete tanks, so it's really showing how the different grape varietals integrate together and how they form an elegant and balanced wines. These are the words that I'm often repeating, but it's truly our style: elegance and balance. And also Côte-du-Rhône, what we have noted, value and quality each vintage. Like, you know, what's important and interesting in the wine world, that each vintage is different, and that needs to show in the wines. But when a producer like ourselves really concentrate on the quality, there's all the wines, we guarantee that there's a good quality, even in the vintages that may not be as highly rated by some press in particular. That's not always the only criteria for wine and for the vintage. Then we'll talk about l'Iraque. As I mentioned, l'Iraque is the most important appellation for us, and it's also a cru in the southern Rhône Valley. If you're not too familiar with what a cru is, so the most famous cru in the southern Rhône Valley is obviously Chateau du Pape, and also there's Chigodas, Vaqueras, Rasteau, and like I said, in our side, l'Iraque and Tavel. So l'Iraque is a small cru, only roughly 700 hectares in production. To give you a good comparison, Chateau du Pape is 3,000 hectares. So l'Iraque is smaller, and up until now has a little bit suffered of not being so well known as we can say the big brother somehow. And but we think that l'Iraque has an interesting future, and the wines definitely offer excellent value for the money. And this is starting to be recognized and renowned by the press and wine professionals alike. So our first l'Iraque cuvée, we have 2 l'Iraque Reds. This cuvée was created in 2013 when we acquired. We had more l'Iraque land following some acquisitions we've made from 2012 onwards. This l'Iraque cuvée is more access to the fruity characters with 60% Grenache, 30 Syrah, and 10 Cinsault, and only aged in concrete tanks. So it's quite intense, more intensity than in the Côte-du-Rhône, and also as the proportion of Syrah is a little bit higher, we have a little bit more spicy and dark fruit notes. The wine can be described as pure. in the food characters, and also very savory and long in the mouth. And we think that this for a cru wine, it's definitely an excellent price point. A few words about the label of this wine. We spoke about the castle's history, and this label is actually a painting that we have, and it's attributed to Victor Hugo, who knew Baron Louis' father, and he has painted this before the restoration of castle around, we think, 1830, and we were able to photograph and scan it to make this beautiful label to show a little bit of the history and the view of Montfaucon as well. So a fruity and intense Lirac for your clients that are looking for a cru wine with its intensity and certain elegance as is characteristic for all our wines. Then we'll talk about another Lirac red cuvée Baron Louis that has been since 1995, since Rodolphe started. He created the cuvée Baron Louis as the top cuvée of the estate. So it's a selection, the grapes come from a selection of our best parcels of old vineyards. And again, we are on a blend of 5 different varietals, dominated by Grenache, then with Syrah, Cinsault, Carignan, and Mourvèdre. And for the Baron Louis cuvée, it's a little bit more complex wine. What we do is we do a longer aging. We feel that sometimes wines, particularly cru wines, they come in the market too early when they are not ready to drink. And what we are trying to do with the Baron Louis is that we bring it to the market when it's more ready to drink. So particularly the tannins are a little bit rounded already. So the aging we do is 1 year in barrels for 80% of the blends, another year in concrete tanks, then we bottle, so after 2 years of aging, and then we age at least another year in bottle before releasing the wine. And we are getting lots of very positive feedback from the market. They have this wine more approachable when it's coming when it's being released, as opposed to releasing, for example, a year earlier. The Baron Louis cuvée is starting to be one of the references in Lirac Cru appellation, and since a long time we have clients, professionals and private clients alike, who are saying that the Baron Louis is definitely a bargain in its price, and also it can equivalent the level of a good number of Chateau du Pape wines as well. So obviously it doesn't have the appellation, but doesn't have the price tag either. So it's interesting for you as a sale to introduce the Lirac Cru appellation. So the right bank of the Rhone River on similar soils as Chateau du Pape. We have some of the Galets Roulés, and also coming from old vineyards. So this wine definitely deserves to be acknowledged on a good or even high quality level. And again, in the style, we're always in the finesse, but due to the aging of wine, we have more complexity, length in the mouth than the previous red wines that are more access to the fruit characters. Then, yes, we saw Vin de Madame la Comtesse, the old wines Clairette, and I briefly spoke to you about the old label. So here we can see the original one. So Vin de Monsieur le Baron de Montfaucon. It's a long name, but it reflects the era that the label was, when the label was created for Baron Louis' father in 1829. We have been able to date the engraving. He was then the mayor of Avignon, and this label has been created by the official engraver of the town of Avignon. And we know that they were making wine in the old cellar, even in those times, and they were actually bottling and using this label, which in the early 1800s was rather rare for our region. In particular, we think this label may even be the oldest label, wine label in the southern Rhone Valley. So when we found the original labels in the castle in 2004, then Rudy said that, well, the label is so exceptional that the wine that carries this label needs to be equally exceptional. So he actually inspired himself from the era of his ancestors, and in those times the vineyards were complanted. The technology and knowledge wasn't as scientific as today, so we can imagine that even for the old cellar, they picked all the grapes and they fermented the wine and put them in the barrel, and that was the wine of the year done. So if you look at the grapes list for this wine, you can see that there's 15 varietals, and so this is quite exceptional. These are all 15 varietals that we have on the estate, and we have kept the best parts of all vineyards to pick these grapes. It drives the pickers a little bit crazy because they have to go around the property. The first day we pick the early ripening varietals. The wine starts to ferment. Roughly a week later, we pick the later ripening varietals, fill up the tank, and all the 15 varietals ferment together. Then we age a year in barrels, a year in tank, and we bottle. And at the moment, we are selling the 2011 vintage. So it's already had some 6 years of bottle time, 5 years of bottle time. So we have a wine that's very elegant. Even though this is a high-end cuvée, we are not looking for extraction or something very strong, but rather, again, elegant, and like we've written, elegant and silky. It's intense, but the wine is not heavy. And like Vin de Madame la Comtesse de Clairette, it's a wine that definitely awakes curiosity from sommeliers and amateurs who have already tasted more or less everything, but 15 varietal co-fermentation can be something quite unique. So what else can I say about this wine? This is also to show with the label and with the work, the way and the style we want to create Montfaucon wines. So a lot of varietals, we do co-fermentations, we're looking for balance in the wines, and with this label we can definitely show that there's a long history behind us as well, and we are here to continue it. And this wine, I think you have a few good clients who have appreciated the quality, and particularly in food pairings as well. Does any of you have any questions regarding our range of wines at the moment? No. So what should you walk away with? Would you retain the information, most important information about Montfaucon? We would like to the words that come into mind when we talk about Chateau de Montfaucon wines is that we're quality producers, among the top quality producers in the southern Rhone Valley. That we're producers of balanced and elegant wines with a lot of finesse, and also with an atypical freshness for Rhone wines. This comes from the fact that we do a lot of blends with a lot of varietals, and also, like I mentioned earlier, in some of the wines, the later varietals that bring a nice natural acidity and freshness. And also, we are a historical family estate, a true wine castle, as you have seen by the images, and we work with a lot of the varietals, and also we would like to be one of the ambassadors of Lyra Cru wines and making it more known. There was an article in the Wine Spectator already a few years back, I think 2014 autumn, lifting Lyrac, and it was an article about Chateau de Montfaucon and Bordeaux in particular. And talking about the same magazine, we were very proud to be selected in the January issue of this year among the smart buy estates in the world. Wine Spectator selected 60 estates, and we were among them, as acknowledged for consistent quality and excellent quality price ratio with our wines. So that's definitely a great acknowledgement. And then a little recap on what we have spoken about. So our region, Southern Rhone Valley, opposite to Châteauneuf-du-Pape, with our appellations Lirac as a cru, and then Côte-du-Rhône and Vin de Pays, those are the two Les Gardettes wines, red and rosé. Terroir, we spoke a little about the soils up to now. So we have 3 different kinds of soils in our vineyards that are not in one plot. They're a little bit scattered. So we have partly, particularly the Lirac vineyards, that have the very famous Galets Roulés pebbles, like what Châteauneuf-du-Pape is famous for. We have some sandy soils that produce very elegant wines. They're more drained. And then also limestone, gravel, and clay, which is good for certain varietals, as the clay can retain a little bit of humidity, particularly in the years that, like we had last summer, that was very, very dry. History, as you saw from the images, as I told you, there's maybe 3 key dates. So 11th century, when the first Tower of Castle was built. Our old winery from 16th century, which shows that wine production was a part of the activities on the estate, at least from that period. And then 1995, which is now the start of our new winemaking history, when Rodolphe came back to the estate. So that's our first vintage, 1995. Our production, so we have 11 different cuvées, and our total production is 20,000 cases. Like for all the estates in the region, 85% of our production would be red wines, and then the remaining 15 would be split between rosé and the white wine. So only 7-8% of the white wine split between the several cuvées. So that's very small production cuvées, all the white wines in general. Then listing the wines that Kindred Wines is carrying from us, which is a very good good scope and good selection of different styles of wines we make. And also for your clientele, you can show and introduce a scope of wines and different profiles. So that's important as well. So we spoke about the Viognier as a varietal, and with the freshness for this varietal. Comtesse Madeleine Lirac Blanc, that is more complex, more full in the mouth, and more gastronomic white wine, but also with some nice acidity and minerality. The old vineyards Clairette, Vin de Madame la Comtesse, truly special, unique, small production from the old vineyards. And Les Gardettes Rosé, so one rosé that's nicely aromatic, also in the mouth. So it's a nice barbecue summer rosé, but also all year round. In France, rosés are a growing interest all year round, and I think this is becoming international as well. Then Les Gardettes in red, so younger vineyards, wine for pleasure, for any occasion. Côte-du-Rhône red. So to introduce our Côte-du-Rhône, because like I said, there's a lot of Côte-du-Rhône in the market. So we'd like to say this is an estate made from older vineyards, hand-picked grapes, and blend of 5 varietals. So it's balanced and fruity and nicely round with the dominance of Grenache. Then the Lirac red with the beautiful old painting label. So we have a little bit more intensity, still fruit concentration, a little bit more spicy due to the higher proportion of Syrah. And then Baron Louis, which is our top cuvée. And we keep on addressing that this is the most important wine for the estate, to show the quality, the complexity of the wines we can produce. And also what can be interesting is that Baron Louis, sell some older vintages as well, which can be interesting for people who appreciate wines that are more rounded and the tannins are really subtle. So don't hesitate to ask us for older vintages. We keep them, and each year we put some for sale. And also to show that if people buy this wine now, they can keep it to 5-10 years, no problem, if they like the wines with more evolution character, but still with balance. It's very, very important on this wine as well, as in all of our wines. And then the Vin de Monsieur le Baron, 15 varietal co-fermentation, so really a unique wine, but still intensity and finesse. That's the two key words for this wine. And the final takeaway, so Chateau de Montfaucon, a renowned top quality Rhone wines with elegance and finesse from a historical family estate. So those are, I think, the key words in a nutshell to talk about us. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate. I've spoken a lot. I don't know if I hope I've been clear enough to introduce